Shortly before the new Batman cartoon, Batman Caped Crusader, was released, a series of interviews with producers Bruce Timm and James Tucker appeared online. As well as describing some of the new villains in the show, they also talked about how their version of Batman would differ to what we've seen before. Bruce Timm described their Batman as weird and unfeeling, pointing to the fact that he views his allies as tools in his war on crime. And for some people that was off-putting. But what these people failed to see is that Caped Crusader is a story about Batman's personal growth and development. It's about him maturing as a person, letting down his emotional walls, and learning to care about people again. Batman isn't exactly known for being a ray of sunshine, but earlier versions of Batman have for the most part had compassion at their core. He had suffered a terrible loss as a child, and his response to that pain was to fight to make sure that no one else had to go through what had been done to him again. And if they did, he would make sure to capture the culprit and see that justice was done. And that's the key distinction between Batman and his villains. Many of Batman's rogues have also had their own personal tragedies. But where Batman thinks of others and wants to protect them, his foes think of themselves and lash out in revenge. It's an overused metaphor, but Batman and his villains are two sides of the same coin, which makes it doubly ironic that the villain that most resembles Batman in Caped Crusader is Harvey Dent. This isn't the first Batman franchise to show Batman and Harvey Dent having an existing relationship, although in this case Dent and Bruce Wayne are presented as friends, but this Batman doesn't have any friends, at least not initially. Dent can be viewed as another tool in Batman's arsenal, although not necessarily to help his crusade. He's more there as someone to aid Bruce Wayne. Batman states that Dent is someone that places his thumb on the scale of justice from time to time, but is generally a decent person. After Dent's face is disfigured by the mob and Batman pressures him to talk about who harmed him, his mind snaps and he goes on a crusade of his own. Caped Crusader's Batman doesn't exactly start out as an empathetic, compassionate hero. That's not to say that he's an unfeeling monster out for revenge, it's just that, at first, he is emotionally distant and disconnected. Seeing Dent go on a violent campaign of vengeance and its fatal outcome opens Batman's eyes. He blames himself, of course, as he had pushed Dent before he was ready without thinking of what the consequences might be, and this makes him reconsider his entire position. As we saw during the brief flashback in Kiss of the Catwoman, Bruce Wayne was deeply traumatized by the murder of his parents, of course, but his response to his pain was anger, to put up emotional walls in an attempt to stop himself from feeling, coupled with a desire to punish criminals. All of his negative energy would be directed towards this mission. Nothing else mattered. No friendships, no family, only punishment. I found the scene where young Bruce wakes Alfred in the middle of the night, staring him directly in the eye as he explains his new mission statement, very powerful. It makes sense that he has this kind of reaction. He has been wounded and his instincts tell him to put up a wall. And that's where we are in the first episode of Caped Crusader, which takes place during the first week of Batman's career. He has been targeting mobsters and disrupting their operations, and he's not alone in this, as Penguin had been targeting Rupert Thorne's warehouses, blowing them up with a massive cannon and then bribing city officials to declare the decimation as accidental. Note how Batman doesn't really care about the devastation or loss of life when Thorne's warehouse explodes in front of him. Moments earlier he had knocked half a dozen men unconscious in that building, and they're doubtlessly dead now, and Batman isn't bothered by this. And that's a key thing about Caped Crusader's Batman. As capable as he is raw and inexperienced. That doesn't mean he's ineffective. He's a decent fighter and goes to great lengths to protect Gotham and its citizens, but he has developed a thick emotional shield to protect himself from being hurt again, and it would take time for that shield to wear down. Another event in the first episode involves Batman running over some of Penguin's henchmen to save the life of Barbara Gordon and Ronnie Cobblepot. That's not something the beat-ass Batman would do, but Michael Keaton's Batman definitely would. Also note how Batman doesn't speak to Barbara or get out to check that she and Ronnie are okay. Instead, he nods at her from behind the tinted windows of the Batmobile and drives off. He knows that he's saved them, those henchmen aren't getting up from that without some help, and he doesn't have time for pleasantries. This Batman tries his best to be neutral, even when faced with the atrocity of Penguin's underwater graveyard or Clayface's sadistic death trap. He remains calm and lets his fists do all of the talking. There's no debating with the villains, no trying to talk them down. He's just going to make them regret their life choices. Things start to change for him when he comes across Catwoman in the third episode. Bruce Timm and James Tucker talked about how there was a natural attraction between Catwoman and Batman, and that this was distracting him from his mission. It felt more to me like she was annoying him and that her selfish crimes were taking up too much of his time that could be better spent doing other things. And it's really interesting that the B-plot of this episode involves Bruce Wayne going to court-mandated therapy after he punched out a journalist. Dr. Quinzel sees right through Bruce Wayne's facade and says that she thinks he's deeply traumatized by his parents' murder. Yeah, Batman is very well aware of how traumatized he is, thank you. And Dr. Quinzel is correct that his Bruce Wayne persona is just that. A shield he puts up to prevent people from getting close to him. He has no real interest in exploring his feelings more. All he wants to do is get signed off. And it's interesting to note that Dent makes a similar observation about Batman later on. When Batman visits Dent in Arkham to persuade him to take the deal to testify against the corrupt officials, Dent is dismissive, stating that Bruce Wayne is the great pretender. He's aware of Bruce's emotional barriers and how phony he is as a person. That jab from Dent is enough to get Batman to briefly drop his barrier, further illustrating how similar the two men are. And yet, in his pursuit of justice, Batman's barriers begin to break down. It started when Batman set a trap for Catwoman with a photographer, Eel O'Brien, lying in wait, ready to take pictures that will be used as evidence against the Catwoman. However, detectives Bullock and Flass arrive with their own plans of dealing with Catwoman. To murder her. If Batman really were a cold-hearted, unfeeling pursuer of punishment, then I think he would have allowed Bullock and Flass to kill Catwoman. After all, they're detectives within the Gotham City Police Department. They're symbols of authority within Gotham. And she is a flagrant criminal. And yet, Batman intervenes, knocking the two detectives unconscious before tending to Catwoman's wound and handcuffing her to a table. This is arguably the first compassionate moment in Batman's career. Catwoman was a nuisance that broke the law, but she didn't deserve to be killed. When told that the photos will also incriminate him in assaulting Bullock and Flass, Batman doesn't care. Catwoman must be punished for her crimes, even if it makes his own life more difficult. Which it does. When Flass and Bullock release the arsonist Firebug in order to lure Batman out, Batman dives in headfirst, with no thought for his own safety. At first he tries to take Firebug down, but when the GCPD turn up and try to kill him, Firebug escapes. At this point, Batman realizes that there are still people in the apartments, and saving them becomes his new priority. This is contrasted with Bullock and Flass, who only care about capturing and probably killing Batman, with no consideration for the people whose lives they are destroying. Where Bullock and Flass's primary act in this episode is the murder of Firebug, Batman and Commissioner Gordon save the lives of 3 children. If Batman were truly dedicated to his campaign of punishment, he would have dropped everything to stop Firebug. But he sees innocent people suffering firsthand, and how callous Bullock and Flass's team are, almost shooting a family in their pursuit of him. Being exposed to other people's pain and suffering gradually wears away at Batman's emotional barrier. In the Stress of Her Regard, the Harley Quinn episode, Batman learns that Dr. Quinzel had been treating other industrialists, some of whom had given away their fortunes before dying in mysterious circumstances. When he decides to investigate Dr. Quinzel, we can tell that she has really ruffled his feathers, because he absolutely destroys her office as he looks through her paperwork. In earlier episodes of the series, we saw Batman stealthily searching through the GCPD's records and examining Basil Karlo's corpse. No one would have known that he had been there, but in this case he doesn't care if anyone knows that he's been to Quinzel's office. I think in some ways he feels betrayed by her and wants her to know that someone is on to her. It's an uncharacteristic expression of his emotions, and it won't be the last one we see in this episode. When Barbara and Harleen fall over the cliff's edge, Batman is able to catch Barbara and chastises her for her emotional outburst. But then he sees Barbara's despair at her friend's apparent demise, and he actually pauses for a moment and apologises as Barbara weeps. We see something similar when Alfred is possessed by the Gentleman Ghost. Batman snaps at Alfred, calling him a fool for saving him from being possessed by the ghost, before admitting that he needs Alfred, not just to polish his batarangs and refuel the Batmobile, but Alfred is one of the few people he has an emotional connection to, even if he had been suppressing it. Sure, that connection may be subtle. He spends most of the series referring to him as Pennyworth and cutting Alfred off whenever he tries to coax the humanity out of him, but the connection is still there. By the time of the 8th episode, Nocturna, Batman has undergone a fair amount of personal growth. Yes, he struggles to articulate himself as Bruce Wayne, which results in the carnival workers thinking he's some sort of pervert chasing after 2 young girls. But as Batman, he has improved. When he deals with Nocturna, he is at his most compassionate. Nocturna had earlier pushed her brother Anton during an argument about her insatiable appetite, and that impact had broken his spine. Not realising the severity of his injury, or not really caring at the time, Nocturna left Anton and he later died. When Batman informs her of his death, and realising that she was responsible, Nocturna attempts to commit suicide by exposing herself to sunlight. I feel that the Batman of earlier Caped Crusader episodes wouldn't have taken the time to talk to Nocturna, and may very well have left her to her fate, but Batman wraps Nocturna in his cape, saving her life, and takes her away for treatment. I'd argue that it's at this exact moment that his crusade becomes less about punishment, at least as Batman had previously defined it, beating people up and sending them to prison, and more about fairness. This scene brings to mind the fan favourite Ace segment from the Justice League Unlimited episode Epilogue, so it's not too surprising that this has resonated with viewers. At the same time, it's at this point that the season-long build-up to the debut of Two-Face happens. I'd argue that the biggest source of personal development for Batman came at the hands of Harvey Dent. After Dent was disfigured for double-crossing the mob, he locked himself away in his apartment and spiraled in despair. Batman, feeling that his friend needed help and motivated by a desire to avenge him, encouraged Dent to try to revert to normality before he was ready, and the pressure of being out in public caused his mind to snap. Batman blamed himself for Dent's murderous crusade against Rupert Thorne. When Alfred tells him that he shouldn't have pushed Dent before he was ready, Batman responds angrily and hangs up, because he knows he was in the wrong. Even when dealing with Dent, Batman is uncharacteristically soft. Compare the way he deals with Dent with how he dealt with Basil Karlo. In both cases, he comes smashing through the skylight, but in Dent's case, Batman disarms him. In Karlo's case, Batman punched him until his face was unrecognisable. Sure, Batman has a personal connection to Dent, and that might explain it, but as I've noted over the course of the series, Batman has become less reliant on his fists, and more about restraining his foes and talking them down. There's also the fact that he sees a lot of himself in Dent. Note that Dent punished the mobsters of Gotham. He wasn't some wild animal attacking innocent people. He was out for revenge against those that wronged him, something young Bruce Wayne would identify with, no doubt. After he and Barbara Gordon persuade Dent to make a deal to testify to the corruption within Gotham, which of course goes wrong, Dent finds himself under the protection of Barbara Gordon, Renee Montoya, Commissioner Gordon, and Batman down at the docks. Despite their efforts, Dent is gunned down by Flass, and Batman's response is genuinely astounding. Seeing Batman with a gun will never not feel wrong, and it genuinely seems like he's about to execute Flass for his multitude of crimes. All the while, Flass states that the kill was justified because he's a cop. He's a symbol of the law in Gotham, which is true. Flass is entirely representative of the corruption within Gotham City. Someone in a trusted position that abuses his power for personal gain and to settle imagined slights. Exactly the kind of thing that Batman stands against. Batman has the cathartic release of pulling the trigger, but he doesn't shoot Flass. Instead, he shoots around him before knocking him out. This sends the message that he could have killed Flass quite easily, but he is choosing to be a different kind of crusader. He doesn't kill his enemies, he apprehends them and sees that they are punished. The entire season had been building to the closing moments of the final episode. In the Batcave, where Batman realises that his one-man mission to punish criminals is flawed. There was very little difference between himself and Dent, and he could see that Dent and his other foes were in the wrong. And therefore, so was he. He tells Alfred that he saw something of himself in Dent, and this has made him reconsider his crusade. Batman's callous pursuit of punishment pushed his friend over the edge, and it got him killed. Almost all of his costumed villains have been on some sort of crusade of their own. Catwoman attempted to restore her life of luxury after her father was sent to prison for tax evasion. Clayface murdered those he believed had wronged him, plus some other people just for fun. Firebug wanted to bring joy to the world through the power of fire. Harley Quinn sought to punish the lawful, but awful elites of Gotham City. The Gentleman Ghost tried to restore his family's lost wealth, and prevent his heritage from being sold off and turned into social housing for the poor. And Harvey Dent got revenge on some of the people that robbed him of his future and his identity. Batman clearly learns from their example. Through saving people, Batman sees the true value of his work, not just being there to punish the bad people that have done terrible things, but to help the victims too. He also develops empathy for his foes. Many of them are people that had things done to them, much in the same way that his family's murder was inflicted on him. And he learns to accept that he is not alone in this mission, that he has friends, kind of, that want to achieve the same thing, and that they are people with their own ambitions and feelings, not tools. And this change in perspective is wonderfully demonstrated in the closing moments of the final episode of Season 1. Firstly, Batman finally called Alfred by his first name, indicating that the days of their master and servant relationship are over. Secondly, as Rupert Thorne celebrates Dent's murder and sits in his armchair looking out at his empire, a batarang smashes through the window, nicking his ear. Across the street stands Batman on top of the building, defiantly, as lightning crashes behind him. This shot is a deliberate reference to the opening sequence of Batman the Animated Series, and demonstrates to us that this Batman has turned a corner in his crusade against crime. I don't expect Batman to make a dramatic change overnight. It can be hard to break a lifelong mindset, but I think that the Batman we see in future seasons of Caped Crusader will be quite different. Okay, that's it for this video essay. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, all the usual YouTube stuff. If you'd like to hear more about Batman Caped Crusader, why not check out our podcast Totally Shui Flipside, where my wife and I have gone through all 10 episodes. This is a spoiler-filled conversation about each episode in sequential order, so only check this out if you've watched the show or if you have no intentions of ever watching it yourself. I offer channel memberships for $1.99 a month, which will grant you early access to my video essays, and some supplementary perks like custom emojis, priority responses to your comments, members-only videos, and community posts. And special thanks to my current channel members, who are all listed on the screen right now. Next time I'm going to talk about the version of Barbara Gordon we saw in Caped Crusader, and how I think that the choices the writers made about her character mean that she will never be Batgirl in future seasons of Caped Crusader. Hope to see you then.